Нет.
When did you arrive from Turkey?
Что в Турции делал?
What did you do in Turkey? My documents expired, so I crossed the border. Once again, your full name. Year of birth, 1998.
Что делал вчера?
What did you do in Crocus yesterday?
Что делал в Крокусе?
What did you do in Crocus?
Застрелил?
I was shooting. You were shooting? You were shooting who? Why? For money. Money? Let's put him up. For how much money? Some 500,000. 500,000 of what? Of rubles. Did you get it from who? I have received only one half. It was transferred to my card. Where's your card? He gave it, and it was in my clothes, in my jacket, so I lost it. Where did you get weapons? They gave it to us. Who they? I don't know who they. They texted me on Telegram without names, without anything. How did they find you? You found them or they found you? They texted me. Why did they text you in particular? I don't know. I was listening to... But how come they just offer you to kill people out of thin air? It doesn't happen like this. What was on Telegram? I was listening to a prophet, to a sermon. You were listening to sermons, and who texted you? Assistant of a preacher. What's his name? No name, no last name, no nothing. They just texted me. When did they text you? A month ago. Who texted you? Exactly. He texted me, he promised me 1 million rubles. What did he promise you? What did he want from you? He offered me and I agreed. What did he offer? He offered money. For what? Money for what? He offered me to do these deeds for money. What deeds exactly? To kill people. To kill who? He just sent me the location. Did they tell you who to kill? People. What people? Doesn't matter. Anyone you meet there, anyone you encounter. Just enter the location and kill people? Yes. Once again, your full name and your year of birth. Born in 1998. September 17th.
Задача понятна.
Понятно. Обеспечим.
По полной программе. Хорошо, репетицируем. Надо рассказать.
Смотаем.
Talk about, obviously, we've all seen the reports in the video coming out of Moscow. This violent shooting at looks like a shopping mall. Can't speak much to the details of it. I mean, this was all just breaking before I came on out here, so we're trying to get more information, but really would refer to Russian authorities to speak to it. The images are just horrible, and just hard to watch, and our thoughts obviously are going to be with the victims of this terrible shooting attack. And I think, you know, you look at that video if you have, and you got to recognize that there's some moms and dads and brothers and sisters and sons and daughters that haven't gotten the news yet, and this is going to be a tough day. So our thoughts are with them. You might have also seen, hopefully you saw the State Department, our embassy there, put out a notice to all Americans in Moscow to avoid any large gathering, concerts, obviously shopping malls, anything like that, just for their own safety. They should stay put where they are and stay plugged into the State Department for any additional updates and information. I'm afraid that's really all I have on that.
All right. I cannot keep this channel on track. But we are back yet again on the Hoplite channel. And I am here, and so are you, to talk about the deep state hocus pocus in Crocus. Yeah, that's the most clever title I could come up with. Cleverest, most clever, whichever is correct. As I'm sure you are probably all aware, unless you are literally living under a rock with no electricity, there was a major terrorist attack in the city of Moscow, Russia, 2 days ago. I'm filming this on Sunday evening, March 24th, 2024. And we're now learning the majority of the details as it pertains to this horrific incident that happened exactly 2 nights ago. I was literally laying on my couch watching YouTube videos like you're doing now, possibly, and I saw in the news feed a snapshot of a burning building, and it says gunmen in Moscow killed dozens, authorities racing to the scene. Click on the video. Burning building was the aftermath of these terrorists who set the Crocus City Hall on fire, and of course the Russian news crews were covering the chaos that was unfolding outside. And so I let 2 days go by, obviously, to let the typical news hysteria die down a bit, and to see what's what. And from the opening intro videos, you could see there, Jack Kirby, one of the mouths for our current administration, was very quick to offer his condolences, his thoughts, his prayers, his wishes for the Russian people affected by this. Because, as he said, there are, nephews, brothers, sisters, aunts and uncles, mothers who don't know yet, etc. You can really tell he cares. And they caught, obviously, the suspected terrorists, and he's already starting to sing like a canary, which is very strange. And more things came out about this incident that I thought were strange as well, which is why I felt compelled to do this episode versus getting the series on Hoplite's Plan to Save America started. That will be coming, but I had to cover this one just because it's so important. But let's recap about what's happened in the last month. I opened with the opening quote. It's very true. It's like there are decades where nothing happens, and then there are weeks or months in which a decade's worth of history will happen. And I think that's kind of going on right now in Russia. It's the worst terror attack on their soil in years. It might be the worst terror attack ever. We don't know. But for a country that's gone through many, this one is significant. Yeah, it's truly horrific. But we need to understand possibly what this means in the grand scheme of things, and not just as a terrible incident on its own, like just a snapshot. You have to look at the whole reel. And it's very strange that my last episode on this channel was literally about the departure of Cookie's Victoria Nuland announcing her retirement from the U.S. State Department, which seemed very sudden and just out of the blue. That happened on May 5th, so just about 20 days ago. What happened 3 days later? Well, we had the U.S. Embassy in Moscow warning citizens of an imminent attack and says to avoid large gatherings. So let's read an article about that right now. And this is from NBC News. U.S. warns of imminent Moscow attack by extremists, urges citizens to avoid crowds. The U.S. Embassy said it was monitoring reports that extremists have imminent plans to target large gatherings in Moscow. This is by Patrick Smith, March 8th of 24, 5:35 a.m. Eastern Time. U.S. citizens in Moscow have been warned to avoid large gatherings Friday and Saturday because of heightened fears of a terrorist attack. The U.S. Embassy in the Russian capital said it was monitoring reports that extremists have imminent plans to target large gatherings in Moscow, to include concerts, and U.S. citizens should be advised to avoid large gatherings over the next 48 hours. U.S. citizens should avoid crowds, monitor local media for updates, and be aware of your surroundings, it said in a brief online update. The embassy did not elaborate on who or what poses the apparent threat to the Russian capital, or what kind of attack may be imminent. But Russia's FSB security service said Thursday that it had foiled a planned attack by an Afghan offshoot of the Islamic State terrorist group on a synagogue in the Kaluga region southwest of Moscow. On the territory of the Kaluga region, a stop was put to the activity of Wilayat Khorasan, a cell of the Afghan branch of the international terrorist organization Islamic State, which is banned in Russia, whose members are planning to commit a terrorist attack against one of the Jewish religious institutions in Moscow, the FSB said in a statement given to the state-run TASS news agency. The FSB said the group was planning to shoot members of the congregation. It added that its officers engaged in a firefight with the militants before its officers, quote-unquote, neutralized them. The case is being investigated in Russia as a conspiracy to conduct a terrorist attack. The FSB said it searched a building used by the group and found firearms, ammunition, and materials for making an improvised explosive device. It was not immediately clear if the FSB statement was linked to the U.S. Embassy warning. The U.S. has repeatedly urged its citizens to leave Russia as relations between the two countries spiral over the Kremlin's invasion of Ukraine and the imprisonment of a number of Americans in Russian jails. Separately on Thursday, U.S. Embassy in Moscow strongly criticized Russia for designating 3 American educational exchange organizations as undesirable, ending a tradition of young people traveling to each other's countries dating back 70 years. The embassy said the decision was a tragic illustration of the Kremlin's desire to isolate its own people, depriving them of the chance to network, expand their horizons, and contribute to building a more prosperous and peaceful world. Russia said it had summoned American Ambassador Lynn Tracy to tell her that the 3 non-governmental organizations would be banned for implementing anti-Russian programs and projects aimed at recruiting agents of influence under the guise of educational and cultural exchanges. Yeah, so that's interesting, huh? That's an article from March 8th. And I remember when this came out, and sometimes the State Department just does this out of abundance of caution. They get an anonymous tip, or they're told, hey, I think there's a terror attack imminent. Oh, when? Probably the next, 72 hours. Definitely within the week. Okay, we'll put out a warning to the embassy. But they say explicitly an extremist attack to target large gatherings in Moscow to include concerts. That word concerts is in the language of the article, verbatim, as you saw I just posted. Did they share this with Russian intelligence, FSB? It's one thing to say, well, we think a terrorist attack is imminent. And, well, you didn't hear it from us, but it's going to be in Moscow, in the Moscow area, and it's going to target large gatherings. For instance, a concert, like at the Crocus City Hall. Did they say Islamic State? Did they say a concert hall? Did they specify a window? They just said imminent, and they said extremists. So it's not very helpful, is it? And Russia says they stopped a Islamic State attack that was planning on attacking some synagogue in some region, and it was an Afghan offshoot of IS. Okay, so we have that, okay? But what happened 8 days later? President Vladimir Putin is reelected for another 6 years as the president of the Russian Federation, and he wins with 87% of the vote, which is more impressive, believe it or not, than Joe Biden getting 81 million unique, legitimate votes in the 2020 election, which is absolutely what happened. And I will go to the grave telling people that Joe Biden got 81 million people to vote for him in 2020. And you should spread that word too. But Putin got 87% of his country to vote for him. So landslide, if there ever was one. And then on the 22nd, 2 days ago, just over a week later, after President Putin is reelected, we had the terror attack at Crocus City Hall. We know right now, Sunday night, the 24th, that 137 people were killed in that attack. At least that number were wounded. We know there were 4 Tajik gunmen from Tajikistan. Again, as you saw from the opening clips, one of them was being interrogated after being apprehended. And the Russian Federation has announced that they have 11 people in custody now suspected to be part of that attack. Interestingly enough, all gunmen surrendered attempting to flee to Ukraine, and one claims they were paid, and that's why they did what they did. As I was sitting on my couch, Western media wasted no time saying in unison, well, this is ISIS-K. Clearly it's ISIS-K. Yeah. The history of ISIS, ISIL, ISIS-K is very dark and clouded, to say the least. We were always told that, well, Al-Qaeda was being defeated in Iraq and ISIS was an offshoot of Al-Qaeda, even more radical sect. But nobody quite knows, like, why were they allowed to form into an organization when the U.S. was waging war against Al-Qaeda? Why not just divert all of your manpower and the war machine against them in Iraq? They took over swaths of Iraq in the matter of days. They're active in Afghanistan, obviously, and I guess in Tajikistan, too. Another fantastic part of the world. It's like, have you ever asked somebody, hey, what are your plans for spring break? It's like, I think me and the girlfriend are going to go abroad. Where? We're thinking Tajikistan. Yeah, you won't believe how cheap the airfare is. Like, yeah, I probably would. Another hellhole. And somehow these 4 Tajiks got into Russia. And again, if you go back to the clip in the beginning, the guy who's being interrogated on his knees says he came by way of Turkey. Now let's read an article about ISIS and the relationship they have with Turkey and how I think Turkey is going to play a much larger role in this story as the details flesh out even further. This is from the Greek Reporter. This is back in February of 2022 by Victor Elias. And it says, Turkey admits sending ISIS terrorists to the West. Turkey admitted openly on Wednesday that it sent thousands of ISIS terrorists to the West. Quote, we have sent thousands of members of Daesh terrorist organization to the West because they transferred them to conflict zones, Soylu said. They are partners in drug trafficking, migrant and oil smuggling, Turkish Interior Minister Süleyman Soylu said. ISIS Kurds, little children of the West, Turkey says. Soylu also suggested the West created and continues to fund ISIS and the Kurds. PKK, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, and Daesh are not enemies to each other, Soylu said. Both of them are little children of the West. Soylu also suggested Turkey was, quote, dealing with the evil mind, claiming Europe is aiding the terrorists. They receive patronage from France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, and all European countries. Soylu has a history of making inflammatory comments, but these are more confrontational, at least to the West, than usual. They do this through intelligence agencies, Soylu said, claiming the West supports terrorist organizations through its own government, including the national security apparatus. They share the money, use it to continue their terrorist acts, and sustain illegal lifestyles. Turkey undermines the fight against ISIS in Syria, says Biden. The U.S. and allies has made comments insinuating Turkey has protected and even supported ISIS among other terrorists. Many Daesh and al-Qaeda leaders are still alive, protected by Turkey in occupied areas of northeast and northwest Syria. The head of the Syrian Democratic Forces Media and Information Office, Farhad Shami, told CBS News in an interview in early February. He, an ISIS fighter killed, was protected between 3 Turkish military bases. Is there any doubt that Turkey turned areas of northern Syria into a safe zone for Daesh, ISIS leaders? In October, U.S. President Joe Biden singled out Turkey for undermining the fight against ISIS with its military offensive in northeast Syria. Quote, the situation and in relation to Syria, in particular, the actions by the government of Turkey to conduct a military offensive into northeast Syria undermines the campaign to defeat the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or ISIS, endangers civilians, and further threatens to undermine the peace, security, and stability in the region. and continues to pose an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and foreign policy of the United States, Biden said in a letter to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Therefore, I have determined it is necessary to continue the national emergency declared in Executive Order 13894 with respect to the situation and in relation to Syria, the U.S. President said. In the past, Turkish President Recep Erdogan has used refugees as pawns and talks about refugees with the EU. We can open the doors to Greece and Bulgaria anytime, and we can put the refugees on buses. So how will you deal with refugees if you don't get a deal? Kill the refugees? Erdogan was quoted in a text as telling the EU officials. Yeah. Oh, Recep Erdogan. Using human shock troops in the form of refugees. Saying they released thousands of ISIS terrorists into the European Union. And the European Union, because they're a bunch of freaking idiots, allowed Recep Erdogan to do this. And there's talk that Turkey wants to join the EU. Here's the problem. Turkey understands that it is the release valve or the firewall, and now they're acting like a release valve between the West in Europe and the glorious, vibrant Middle East. And they use this as a blackmail device. Erdogan's saying like, well, if NATO doesn't do this for us, then maybe we won't do this. As in maybe we won't cooperate in their war against ISIS. Or if Europe doesn't do this for us as far as the EU goes, maybe we'll release thousands of ISIS terrorists among thousands of refugees, and then we'll just shuffle them off to Greece and Bulgaria. And then Greece and Bulgaria will then shuffle them off to Germany, France, and the UK, and Sweden. And then you can enjoy all those people, which as you can see, has gone swimmingly well since 2015. I have no doubt that these Tajik gunmen at Crocus gained access to Europe and Russia eventually via Turkey. It's highly likely that Turkey armed them. It's highly likely that Turkey, in concert with its NATO allies, the U.S., set this whole thing up. And that's why I call this deep state hocus pocus. These guys aren't ISIS. But Turkey is known to permit ISIS to operate in its country and uses them as a threat against its neighbors. And Turkey has had to launch its own counterterrorism operations against ISIS because, well, they're kind of like the Frankenstein monster. If you let them loose into the city, yeah, they'll terrorize everyone in there, but they also might come back and terrorize you. So they've kept this monster on a leash, and sometimes it gets off the leash. And Turkey is probably using this as a way to play both sides. I'm sure Turkey wants to do business with Russia in the BRICS coalition, but they also want to be able to rely on NATO for top grade weaponry and commerce with the West and the EU. And it just so happens, like I said, this terror attack comes a week after President Putin is reelected with an 87% majority. How does this make him look? Does it make him look strong? Does it make him look in charge? Does it make him look on top of things? No, it's quite embarrassing for him that in their capital city, these four quote-unquote terrorists, although I think they're hired mercenaries by the U.S. government, and that they were trained and assembled and outfitted in Turkey and were handled all the way through Tajikistan and Turkey. And they were told, here's what you're going to do. You are going to attack this concert hall on this night. You and your bros are going to jump in a car, a white Renault, by the way, which you drove up in. And then if you make it to the Ukraine border, which is where they were fleeing to, you'll get paid the other half of your money. But you don't get paid unless this attack in Crocus is successful. And we need minimal casualties to be 100 or above. Which is why they shot the place and then lit it on fire and then tried to escape. That's never been the MO of ISIS or ISIL or ISIS-K. These guys are complete Muslim fanatics. They're jihadis. They don't do what they do for money. They do it for salvation. They do it for the glory of their prophet. And they will go down fighting and trying to take as many people, to the afterlife with them as they can. These guys fled in a car, and I had to look this up because as an American, raise my hand. If there is geography outside of the continental U.S., I'm not quite sure how things are in relation to everything else. Like, how far is it from, London to Liverpool? So, I don't know, maybe a half hour? It's probably farther than that. But I looked this up. And the Crocus City Hall, which is just outside of Moscow, is like a 10-hour and 15-minute drive to Kharkiv, right? So these guys thought they were going to shoot up a concert hall in Moscow, kill over 100 people, jump into a white sedan, which I got to think is not the most common car in Russia, is a white Renault, and they were going to drive 10 hours straight and then somehow get over the border into Ukraine, into Kharkiv. And by the way, you have to pass through Belgorod to get into Kharkiv. Unless you take some weird circuitous route around it, which is going to add more time. You're now the most wanted man in Russia. They don't even care about Zelensky and his band of misfits. They're after you guys. Every cop, every Russian soldier, every concerned citizen is on the lookout for this white car and 4 Tajiks that attacked this concert hall. You're going to have to gas up at least 3 times on that 10-hour drive. You're not just going to drive straight 10 hours in one car with 4 people weighing it down. I have no idea what they were thinking. Do you honestly think you're going to shoot up a concert hall in Moscow, in the capital city, and then make the 10-hour drive and get over the border to Ukraine, a country that Russia's at war with? There's going to be at least 3 to 4 checkpoints to get to Kharkiv once you're in Belgorod. Dude, this was insane, to think that they could pull that off. And this is why I don't think they were ISIS, because ISIS would have gone down swinging. ISIS, to their credit, if I can give them any credit, are true believers. They would have either been shot to death or they would have ran out of ammo. That's their MO. That's why they're so dangerous. That's why U.S. and foreign intel communities have to share information on these people, is because they are that fanatical. They are that evil. It's pure evil. And even, Turkey refers them as Daesh, which is what we should call them, not ISIS, it's Daesh. It's like calling them crap. It's their Islamic term to refer to them as, like garbage, like animals, which they are. Call them Daesh. These guys claim they were Daesh, but then all of a sudden, once they're scooped up by Russian authorities, they're crying for mommy and saying, oh, we did it for money and we were told we would get paid later in rubles. This has all the hallmarks of a deep state CIA, NSA op. And it was meant to harm this guy right here, Vlad Putin. Now let's go back and read a quick blurb from an article that I covered in the last episode about Victoria Nuland. Going back to Zero Hedge, this was from March 9th. We got to rein her in behind the scenes of Nuland's early retirement. And I'm going to scroll down here, and it says, while there have been rumors that maybe she could be in poor health, McGovern told Russia's Sputnik that the notoriously hawkish Nuland was a liability at a moment NATO and Russia are inching closer to direct nuclear-armed confrontation. My best guess here is that the CIA and Defense Department and the NSA got this message around saying, look, Victoria's got her own agenda here, said McGovern. The former CIA official continued to speculate, the president doesn't really want to strike these ammo depots in Russia or knock down the Crimean Bridge. So we got to rein her in. I guess it's time for her to go to early retirement. Okay. That's according to this guy who was, in the business. He's saying, the message probably went around, this woman is off the rails. She's got her own agenda here. She's a liability. She's way over her skis, and we're getting closer to NATO and Russia possibly going kinetic here in nuclear war. We got to rein her in. I think it's time for her to go. She goes on the 5th. The embassy puts out this warning 3 days later. Hey, everybody in Moscow might want to lay low. Don't go into big crowds or anything, concerts. Putin gets reelected, and kaboom, on the 22nd, we have this attack. All of this just magically happens in the span of 3 weeks. Do you believe that? Do you think it's just, it's just happenstance? Victoria said, well, now's a good time for me to leave, I guess. I could wait, but I think right now is good. I'm going to take that job at Columbia teaching foreign policy to the next generation of lunatics. And the U.S. Embassy says we think probably Vicky, with her deep state connections, helped Honcho and quarterback this attack, just like the Maidan coup, just like possibly the Nord Stream pipeline being blown up, just like the Crimean Bridge, the Kursk Bridge, or the awful assassination attempt on Alexander Dugin, which ended up killing his daughter instead. No offense to the Ukrainians, but you're not capable of this stuff. And even if you were, you don't have the money and the resources and the intel network to successfully plan it out and to orchestrate it when the time is right. These 4 Tajik gunmen are most likely mercenaries hired by U.S. intelligence services, and they were planning this probably earlier under the direction of Nuland. When she left, they realized, well, now that she's gone, maybe this thing is not going to be an issue. And then by the 8th, they realized, I think she's already set this in motion. And these guys are already in the country, which means they want to get paid. They already got paid for half of it, so they're going to just go ahead and pull the trigger, literally. And once Putin gets elected, that was probably their go sign, like, we're going to hit a soft target in the heart of Russia, and then we're going to drive 10 hours to Kharkiv and make it to the Ukrainian side and get the rest of our loot. I don't believe this is ISIS K attack. Whatever the Russians claim they did, or whoever they stopped back on March, probably completely unrelated. Maybe they just arrested some Afghans who were circulating some material that was disparaging of the Russian government and possibly endorsed terrorism, and then they just arrest these guys, and they put the story on the front page of the Moscow Times so that everybody could just relax. But obviously that's not what the U.S. Embassy was talking about. U.S. Embassy probably knew in the U.S. State Department that Victoria Nuland was hatching something like this. And they didn't want Americans to be caught up in it. So they just put the warning out to the U.S. Embassy, and they probably told the Russians, we have intel that there's an imminent attack, and it's probably going to be in Moscow shortly. So let your people know, like, large gatherings should be advised to stay safe. And they didn't go into any further detail because they'd be tipping their hand to the Russians, like, yeah, we know about this attack because somebody in our State Department and other folks who possibly still work in the State Department helped put it together. Because that's what you do when you're losing a war. You start to resort to asymmetrical warfare. And terrorism is the #1 tactic of asymmetrical war. It's guerrilla warfare. And that's what's going on. I believe this terror attack was done by the U.S. State Department using these 4, 85 IQ Tajiks. They were told to show up at certain places. They were, I guess there's video footage now of them casing the place and taking pictures. They knew exactly how big the place was. They knew where all the exits were. They knew how to get in. They knew how to get out. They chose a very busy time of night to attack this place, so that Russian authorities would have a very difficult time getting response units there, to get EMS and fire crews there. This attack took significant preparation and planning, and it took money. I'm sorry, but I don't believe the Ukraine government put that all together on their own. I think this is my government's spy network. And I'm going to read an article from Zero Hedge again, what came out today, and talk a little about that. This is from, as I said, today. U.S. and NATO issue rare solidarity message after Moscow attack death toll rises to 137. Bizarre terrorist confessions emerge. Russia's state media has underscored that partners and geopolitical rivals alike have joined the chorus expressing horror in the wake of the Crocus City Hall attack. This is somewhat surprising, including a statement of solidarity from Washington as the death toll has risen to 137. U.S. strongly condemns yesterday's deadly terror attack in Moscow. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said in a Saturday statement, "We condemn terrorism in all its forms and stand in solidarity with the people of Russia in grieving the loss of life from this horrific event." Even NATO issued a statement of condolence, with NATO spokesman Farah Dakalalala saying on X that the Western media's military alliance unequivocally condemned the attacks targeting concertgoers in Moscow. "Our deepest condolence to the victims and their families," she said, adding that nothing can justify such heinous crimes. Pope Francis, too, offered special prayers for victims on Sunday. But Western officials hit back at President Putin's attempt to link the terror attack, which ISIS-K has reportedly taken responsibility for, to Ukraine. Both the president and Kremlin officials have alleged the gunmen were trying to escape through Ukraine territory, utilizing a window of support from across the border. UK Chancellor of Exchequer Jeremy Hunt told Sky News that Britain has very little confidence in anything the Russian government says. Well, thanks for that, Jeremy. "We know that they are creating a smokescreen of propaganda to defend any utterly evil invasion of Ukraine. But that doesn't mean that it's not a tragedy when innocent people lose their lives, when you have horrible bombings." Hunt said, further emphasized that London takes what Russian government says with an enormous pinch of salt, after what we have seen from them over the last few years. Meanwhile, Russia continues to investigate who was ultimately behind the attack, as it currently has 11 people in custody, and among them 4 gunmen. Videos emerged online showing some of the apprehensions as well as the confessions surrounded by Russian security service personnel. Russian authorities are still very early in the investigation. The confessions and claims and counterclaims are still emerging and remain bizarre and murky. On Saturday, RT Editor-in-Chief Margarita Simonyan posted footage of the interrogation of one of the suspects. The man in the video claims that he went on a killing spree after he was promised 500,000 rubles or $5,400 US. Suspect also claimed his handlers had instructed him as to where the attack should take place. He was ordered to kill people there, doesn't matter who. Suspect claimed the terrorist act was organized on Telegram with an unknown person who provided weapons. Gunmen, later same day of the attack, were apprehended in the Bryansk region, not far from the border with Ukraine, according to Russian official statements. Amid an ongoing flurry of speculation over the circumstances surrounding the Crocus Hall massacre and the question of whether state actors or intelligence services may be involved, more videos have emerged which appear to tie the attackers to the Islamic State. Prior social media claims that asserted one or more attackers were Ukrainian appear to have been debunked. Various theories continue to be advanced, also by mainstream pundits, independent journalists, and Glenn Greenwald had pointed out that there may be more questions than answers at this point. In a statement released Sunday, Russian investigative committee detailed 4 sets of combat ammunition with more than 500 bullets and 28 magazines and 2 Kalashnikov assault rifles, which the attackers were armed with, were confiscated from the scene of tragedy. The site intelligence group is often cited and relied upon in Western media, claims the Islamic State, through its official channels, has revealed the 4 fighters involved in the Moscow concert hall operation and is boasting about the fiercest attack in years. Russia has long been a avowed enemy of ISIS, especially after the Russian military intervention in Syria starting in 2015, when Putin joined Assad in battling jihadists in the war-ravaged country. Meanwhile, the Russian government has continued to question what intelligence concerning the planned attack that Washington may have had ahead of time. In a March 7th emergency alert, the U.S. Embassy in Moscow said it was monitoring reports that extremists have imminent plans to target large gatherings in Moscow, to include concerts. The embassy further urged U.S. nationals in the country to remain vigilant and monitor local media for updates. The Kremlin has demanded answers and even raised the possibility of Western involvement, given also the current claims that the terrorists may have had a Ukraine connection. All right, I'll stop right there because it's just going over what I went over here. Everybody's offering condolences. Yeah, that's a very tough thing to do, right? After everybody is lying dead, and the smoke is still coming out of their bullet wounds. The U.S. government said, "Well, this is clearly ISIS-K, and we extend our condolences." And this Jeremy Hunt prick says, "Well, we don't really believe anything Russia says." So, but terrorist attack is quite sad, no matter how it happens. So, we're sorry about that too. And now Russia wants to know. It's like, well, you were telling your own people to avoid large gatherings, and in particular concerts, but that's about as far as you went, right? Like, what was the actual warning in the U.S. Embassy? I'm sure it was more specific than that. And now Russia is asking the question that I'm asking is, what did the Western intel agencies know, and when did they know it? And if they weren't setting this up, did they know about it beforehand, and then did they just let it happen? Is it just kind of like shake up the jar of scorpions, throw it next to somebody's sleeping bag, and just stand back and see what takes place? And we saw what took place. It's way too convenient what's going on right now. Like I said, all of this stuff happened in a matter of 3 weeks, and you want us to believe like, well, it was just ISIS-K, and it's obviously because Putin supported Bashar al-Assad in Syria back in 2014, and that's why they're doing what they're doing. Never mind the fact that both the CIA and the Pentagon armed and supported both sides of that conflict, which is crazy, right? We have like pro-Assad forces being supported by the Pentagon, and then anti-Assad ISIS forces being supported by the CIA. It's craziness. And I think it's being done to deliberately evoke a response from Vladimir Putin that will be rash. And maybe they want him to go after ISIS in Tajikistan. And then the CIA and the military-industrial complex can start arming all of the rebels and ISIS-K in Tajikistan, and they can start killing Russian soldiers in Tajikistan, and then that regional war will spin up. And they can possibly salvage the war that's being lost in Ukraine by starting a new one in Tajikistan using ISIS-K, ISIS as their proxy army in that crap hole country. That's my bet, is that Nuland realized Ukraine is not going to win this war. We have to go to asymmetrical. Let's try to see if we can goad the Russians into starting a war in a foreign country after they suffer a terror attack. Maybe that'll work. Maybe the deep state Hocus Pocus and Crocus can get Putin to commit troops to a foreign country that is not next door to Russia, and then we can deal him some damage there. And I think when other State Department people figured out what she was coming up with, they said, yeah, time out. Vicky, you're out of here. Like this war in Ukraine that you have completely muffed since day one is going to be your swan song. You are not going to be able to walk us down any more disastrous paths. And we are not going to permit your State Department to try and turn this Ukraine war into a series of proxy wars across the globe. You're done. And unfortunately, I think the State Department realized this terrorist attack was already in motion. There was no stopping it. So the best they could do was warn the embassy and hope it didn't come to fruition. But obviously we saw two nights ago it did. And that's my guess. But if you agree or disagree, that's what the comments are for. Again, being shadow banned here, I will get 10 views in the first hour, and then I'll get 20 views in the next 3 hours, and then I will get 45, 50 views, and then it just flatlines. And I guess nobody else wants to watch it. It rises to 50 people, and then boom. Anyway, that's the way it goes here on YouTube. If you're saying certain things and covering certain stories with a different angle. But anyway, for those of you 40 or 50 who did watch this, I appreciate it. If you want to give us a thumbs up, and if you're new here by any chance, a subscription, could always use that. But yeah, unless crazy stuff kicks off like this, I will continue hopefully with my series I want to do on how Hoplite saves America, the master plan as it is. But until then, stay safe out there. Watch your six. These things are happening in major cities like Moscow, and there is no promise that it won't happen in a major city where you live. So keep your head on a swivel, and we'll see you next time. Take care.